Hello, everyone. Hope you're well and welcome back to the show after a week away. This is episode 114 of the Meet the Farmers podcast, and I'm your host, Ben Eagle. Now, several months ago, I received an email from a former guest of the show, livestock farmer James Allen, which was all about celebrating the often little appreciated dung beetle, which is what today's episode is all about. Since then, James and a small team of others, including entomologist and farmer Sally Ann Spence, dairy farmer Bruce Thompson, vet Claire Whittle, and PhD entomologist Max Anderson, have produced a website and are determined to spread the word about the benefits of dung beetles for farming and increase the general awareness of how important they are. And today is partly about doing just that. And I'm thrilled to be joined by two members of the team, Claire Whittle and Bruce Thompson. Welcome to you both. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Ben.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having us. Very exciting. We get to talk about poo.
Always exciting, especially on a Wednesday afternoon when we're recording this. Can you both start by telling me where, when, and how your interest in dung beetles came from? Claire, could we start with you?
Yeah, definitely. So
that's such a weird question.
It is a really weird question. A few years ago, I was recommended a book, which was Wilding by Isabella Tree, by one of my farming clients. So Georgina Edge, they farm down near Telford, and they do a lot of nature-friendly farming. I was really interested, and she told me to read this book. And there was a couple of pages in there about dung beetles and what they do. And if I'm honest with you, and I didn't have any idea about dung beetles being in the UK. We see these big sort of African rolling beetles, and we don't have them here. So I think that was kind of sparked a little bit of an interest. And subsequently to that, last year I did a postgraduate certificate in conservation medicine. And as part of that, for a bit of coursework, we had to do an article as if we were writing for the National Geographic on an endangered species. And it was up to us what we did. And I found this dung beetle called Copris lunaris, which is it's basically considered extinct in the UK, last seen in 1974, and it's on the Natural England's red list of beetles. And it's got this single horn, so I called it Britain's last unicorn, and I wrote about that, about this beetle. And there's this little sort of faded sepia photograph, and I thought it had quite a lot of character, and I love the sort of mythology side of stuff as well. So the ancient Egyptians obviously had this scarab-faced god called Khepri, who was like, they sort of equated the dung beetle rolling the dung across the ground with the rolling the sun across the sky. So it was sort of very heavily worshipped, and I think it used to be this sort of really revered, respected species, and I guess we've lost that a little bit, and it just sparked an interest.
Cool. Bruce, can you remember when your first love came about?
Yeah, well, Claire kind of hit on the African dung beetles. Well, it was about 10 years ago, more than that now, my then girlfriend, now wife, and I were on a safari down in South Africa, and we saw these dung beetles, these rollers rolling these balls of dung and fighting over bits of poo, elephant poo, and burying them in the soil. And I thought, gosh, wouldn't it be absolutely fantastic if we had those in Ireland? And I suppose fast forward then about 7 or 8 years, I got a chance conversation talking about anthelmintics with Sally Ann Spence, and I was saying, about we don't have dung beetles in our farm, and she was adamant that I did. So after about an hour and a half of a brain dump on the phone, I went out and started opening up some cow pats, and lo and behold, here we had dung beetles in our dung pats. They had been there working away all along under third.
So how did both of you, Sally and Max, come together, and where did the idea for the website, first plug for this of the day, dungbeetlesforfarmers.co.uk, where did that come about?
Yeah, so I've received an Nuffield scholarship to investigate these dung beetles a bit further. And with that, I got talking on a webinar about dung beetles, and James then post that James contacted me to see would I be interested in creating a website with himself and Sally Ann and put us all together. And we pulled in Claire then as well. And that was how that came about. And we just all clicked together. We're a very diverse group of professionals, and we just all clicked together, and it's fantastic that the different aspects of coming at these dung beetles have brought a website together.
Yeah, I mean, Claire, we'll go into the detail a bit in a bit during the show, but do you want to just tell us briefly about the website and what it's about and what's on there?
Yeah, so I should actually say as well, so James is the mastermind. I think Bruce would agree with me. So he's the one that keeps us all in line. He's a bit of a dad. He's the dad.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
He'll like that. Will he like that?
Yeah, he gave us he gave us some warnings of going in here today. So yeah. Don't say this.
He keeps us all in line, and he actually organises all the content, and so he's very, very good, and he really does drive it forward. But basically, the idea is that it's a bit of a resource for farmers, for entomologists or vets or anyone involved in the agricultural industry to be able to find out a little bit more about dung beetles and what they can do to help. So they're obviously, we think they're really important, and they provide a lot of services. So it's basically an information resource.
Let's talk about your Nuffields, because you're both doing Nuffields. Bruce, let's turn to yours first. You're looking at anthelmintic resistance control measures incorporating pastoral management and dung beetles to increase biodiversity. Rolls off the tongue there. How did you come to that topic?
Well done. I can't even get that off my tongue.
I've been practicing that all day. I'm so glad.
Even though that anthelmintic took a bit of work. I always had an interest in soil and the effects that our products that we use on the farm, on day-to-day products, have on the soil and biodiversity. So I didn't really actually grasp these dung beetles as explained earlier, but having talked to Sally Ann, she woke my eyes up to these beetles actually providing a function in terms of parasite control, and bearing in mind that we have this issue of anthelmintic resistance increasing across the country, I decided to investigate and kind of quantify what these dung beetles can actually provide in terms of parasite control on farms. So I applied for the Nuffield scholarship on that ground, and started looking at grassland management and grazing strategies to come up with more of a diagnostic and risk aversive type of strategy to parasites, because we've spent 3 generations trying to kill parasites and eradicate them from our farms, and it clearly hasn't won. And now the parasites are actually starting to get ahead of us because they're getting resistant to our products, and we've no new products coming on the market. So it's a matter of looking at how we can manage the parasites on farms rather than trying to get rid of them, and reduce our reliance on veterinary medicines, and to come up with more of a diagnostic and more targeted use of these products, not only to reduce them, but to actually save the products we have, because the products we have, they're really a miracle cure for diseased animals, but they're not, in my view, a management tool, and we have to change our mindset on that. So that was kind of that's aiming me towards my big long Nuffield title. So that's basically that. I did manage. I was lucky enough to do a small bit of traveling in March 2020, just before the world changed, and since then I've been at home here doing Zoom calls and team calls and bits and pieces on my own farm as well.
Yeah, I was going to say before we go on to Claire's, that was going to be a question to both of you, just about how has that been? Because clearly a lot of, I talked to quite a few Nuffields and asked them about that, but how has that been, not having the ability to have that travel element through this last year?
Yeah, I suppose yeah, like I say, I managed to travel in South Australia and Tasmania, and that was just the start. It was really mean. It's like bringing a child into a sweet shop and then telling them you can't have any sweets, you know. I was only getting started, and yeah, look, yeah, I suppose it was completely unexpected. I was getting really looking forward to traveling the world and meeting all these fantastic people. In particular, I suppose the biggest loss is traveling with my own Nuffield scholars from
Yeah.
different parts of the world, because you really gain some information off of people with the same kind of mindset, open mindset. Um, that's been a bit of a look. It's been a bit of a kick, but look, there's been plenty of upheavals in the last year in everyone's life. So look, it's a small thing, I suppose, in the grand scheme of things. We have been able to continue online, and look, these platforms, Zoom and Teams, have been great. I found it really good that you can drop on someone for half an hour or an hour of a call, and it's no big deal for them, and it's no big deal for me to do it. I can fit it in around my working day, and it's part, relevant to my topic or whatever, and yeah, move on to the next topic. So look, I suppose we have a wider net now with these platforms. It's just that the net's a little bit coarser, I suppose. Where I did get to travel, yeah, particularly with a couple of guys down South Australia, and sit in the jeep and solve all the world's problems while you were traveling from one place to another, and drinking some of professor's homemade wine, and
it's all those extra bits, isn't it?
Yeah, they're the bits you miss, admittedly. Yeah, where it's absolutely completely irrelevant to what you're actually there for. But look, we'll get back to it. Yeah, we'll get there again.
Yeah, exactly. What about your experience so far, Claire?
Yeah, no, similar to Bruce. So I'm actually a year behind Bruce. So I'm a 2021 scholar. So we haven't started traveling yet, and it is a travel scholarship. That's what it's for. But they've been very good as well. We're not under any pressure to get it done in the same time scale or anything like that, and we're just waiting and hoping. So fingers crossed. But yeah, we don't know yet. It'll just be a case of as and when. My plan to do a little bit, hopefully, just UK travel to start with, just to cut a week up north and a week down south, and then obviously spread out a bit from there. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. And your title, let's go for yours. Yours is slightly easier. It's Do Regenerative Agriculture Principles Improve the Health and Welfare of Livestock? I mean, massive title. How did you come to that? And how does it relate, if at all, to dung beetles? Let's try and get it back to the topic.
It is quite broad, I guess. Yeah, a very broad topic. But I think dung beetles are a part of that. And I think I got interested in regenerative agriculture through the certificate that I did. Yep. So obviously the certificate in terms of post-conservation medicine was massive topic as well. So we covered everything from Arctic foxes to problems with poaching in the subcontinent and various things. Obviously I always wanted to bring it back to farming. So like regenerative agriculture covers some of that. And it's a principle of sort of seeing farms as ecosystems, regenerative agriculture, and farming alongside nature. Yep. And I guess one of the cornerstones of that would be reducing inputs. Now, whether that's fertilizers, pesticides, insecticides, antibiotics, or even sort of anthelmintics and antiparasitics. And I guess that falls under there as well. So in a way that it does relate to dung beetles, because obviously we're talking about anthelmintic use. But yeah, overall, I think a lot of work's been done on the sort of soil health of regenerative agriculture, but not a lot of people have looked at how the animals perform in those systems. And I think that's obviously from a vet's perspective, that's really important. Yeah. And I really, really want to prove that it's true.
Yeah. Let's go back to the basics. Bruce, I suppose, let's ask it, what are dung beetles, first of all, and what role do they play in the ecosystem?
Globally, we have 3 different types of dung beetles. We have the rollers that we discussed there earlier, but we don't have those in Ireland or the UK. We have tunnelers, which they live under the dung path, like down in the soil. So what they do is they literally take the poo and dig a tunnel down into the soil and bury the poo into the soil, and that's where they lay their eggs.
Interesting. Okay.
The most common beetle we have is the Aphodius type. They're the dwellers. They live in the dung pats and they lay their eggs in the dung pats. So look, what do these beetles do to the ecosystem? Well, they get rid of these dung pats that are festering on top of the soil, and they're a home for nuisance flies, and these flies can cause problems for animals. But not just that, but the beetles themselves are actually food for different types of other creatures. So everything basically is trying to eat the beetles, as that's what Dr. Sally Ann says. The bats in particular are very reliant on one of our most common beetles, which is a Aphodius rufibis. That'll be one of them. Sorry, did you want to add anything to that? The ecosystem.
She just dozed off there.
Yeah. She usually does when it's that
I quite like the idea of them as ecosystem engineers. So obviously we have these big tunneling species that go like right down, almost a meter or so into the soil. And by doing that, they obviously some of them will drag muck down with them as well. So they make these brood balls underneath the dung pat. So they're almost pulling that muck down into the soil. They're creating sort of airways and aeration of the soil by opening up. Sorry, I'm not doing very well with my wording here, am I?
Okay.
Basically enhancing the soil structure by sort of tunneling through the soil. So we think obviously earthworms moving through the soil, but dung beetles also do this too. And yeah, I think that the fact that they reduce that pasture fouling, like Bruce said, they're like basically big pasture vacuums. So they just suck in all that liquid out of that dung. And if that makes that more uninhabitable for all the other problem, so flies, obviously in a cattle, etc. I think that's pretty incredible. And it's not one, obviously they're only small things. You need lots of them.
Yeah.
And we are seeing less and less of them, unfortunately.
Yeah. But I knew nothing before really, but I mean there are in the UK there are more than around 60 different species as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of species, and as Bruce said, we've got those two different types. So we've got those dwellers and we've got those tunneling beetles as well. We do tend to see, I think the ones that I look at in fields, you tend to see a few similar species, and then there's obviously more rare ones. So I think about 50% of those species there are actually fairly endangered. So I know 25% of them are considered sort of nationally rare. Which is quite a high proportion. So we're in terms of what we actually physically see, and they all inhabit different areas. So some of them like sandy soils, some of them prefer to be in shaded spots, some of them like clay soils. So you see different, depending on the geography and the geology of the UK, you'll see different dung beetles in different parts, which I always find really interesting as well.
Yeah.
And I think, the worry is that we seem to be losing them at a pretty incredible rate. And that's not just because of, we've talked a little bit about anthelmintics, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on as well, but, changes in land use. So, if there was a field of permanent pasture and it had cattle on and it's sold to build houses, then suddenly you've lost that habitat. So we need cattle and we need sheep and we need livestock out in our field. They need dung basically. Lots of different species. I've not seen them all, and that's why I said to you before, it's this little parcel of excitement, because you never know what you're going to find in there.
Yeah.
And when you find something you've not seen before, or something that's more unusual, it's so exciting when you pull it out and have a nosy at it. And I'm not the best at identifying them, but I still get excited when I see something I haven't seen.
Say it must be. It's almost a lifetime's work. I assume actually, into just learning the differences and the intricacies between them.
Yeah, well, Sally has when we're on a Zoom meeting with Sally, she's got about 15 microscopes behind her, and I have no idea what they're all for, but I really, I really want to go and have a look. But I think you almost need to be at that level, because they'll have different numbers of like striae on their backs, or different little pock marks and things that you can tell them apart. And obviously with your naked eye, or me with a cracker magnifying glass, it's not the best.
Amazing. Bruce, from a farmer's point of view, and what would your message to farmers be in terms of practical measures that they can put in place to help dung beetle populations?
Okay, well, look, I suppose we kind of touched on the anthelmintics and the flight control Claire was kind of mentioning there. So some of the products we're using on animals are very damaging to these invertebrates, these beetles. Um, so look, I suppose the products like the clear wormers in particular, which would be your macrocyclic lactones, um, those actually they stay um, appearing in the animal's feces and could still do damage to the populations of the beetles for over a month after they've been administered. So your anthelmintics would be one. Flight control is another. So your synthetic pyrethroids. So the products that you again put on an animal's back to as we call them fly repellents, but they're actually insecticides. So these actually kill the insects. So it's obviously going to have the same effect on dung beetles, and this stuff goes through the animal system unmetabolized as well and appears in the dung, where we're expecting these beetles to reproduce as well. So that's a problem as well. So again, looking at alternatives there, do we need to use them in dairy cows when we could use a product that's incorporated into our teeth spray instead? Do we need to use it for all the summer? Can we just use it when the flies are a problem? Can we look at alternatives like Stockholm tar or eucalyptus oil? These are all things we're looking into and looking at alternatives. So that's one area is the chemicals. Another is there'll be some beetles will be emerging in late autumn and into the winter. They'll be winter active, but we've gotten really good at closing off our paddocks over the winter and putting the animals into sheds. So these invertebrates literally starve to death out in the fields. So what we need to be looking at doing now is maybe letting out a couple of animals for a few hours and once a week or whatever. It doesn't have to be a big break for the fields where the whole place is tore up, but a little bit out here and there with those animals will help. You're literally throwing a lifeline to those beetles. As we mentioned there, burrowers and aphodius, the dwellers. You kind of have to think of their actual homes are the dung pats or in the soil. So if we're going out harrowing paddocks to get rid of dung pats, we're going to get rid of these homes. Or if we're ploughing fields regularly or tilling them, it can be quite damaging to the homes as well.
Yeah.
They don't like these wet, sloppy dung pats that we've gotten really good at producing. So a bit of fibre in the animal's diet. Now there's I suppose from a practical point of view, how is this done? I suppose Claire will tell us we should have all our farms in multi-species forwards, but that's the regenerative hat. But that's a big conversion, and to try and do over a short period of time, it is quite difficult. But we can do things like maybe adding a bit of straw when the fibre is low in the animal's diet, or the oil levels in the grasses are quite high.
It's just fascinating. It completely changes the way you look at pasture and pasture management just by looking at it almost on that micro scale.
Yeah, like they're little habitats. I think I heard recently that a cow is able to support its own weight annually in insects through the feces that it leaves on pasture. That's quite fascinating when you think about it.
Yeah.
But I suppose, Ben, when you think back, I'm old enough to remember. I'm not old by any means, but I'm old enough to remember. And
You're old by my standards, Bruce.
Yeah. We can start with the stories now, Claire.
we should be recording this in the evening.
Yeah. Oh, it gets quite nasty in the evening.
After the watershed.
Yeah, I can remember coming home on a sunny summer's evening and having to clean the headlights on my parents' car. because of all the bugs that had hit off of it. Like, and that hasn't happened for the last number of years, and
Yeah,
something
so
has
true.
changed in the environment. And like, look, there's probably plenty of factors affecting it, but like agriculture has its role to play in it as well. What we're doing on the farms has an impact on the environment, and that can be a positive or a negative one. So, and the larger and more intensive we get, the more of an impact we have. So, we need to make that a good impact. So that's yeah, that I suppose we're kind of hitting a few practical points there. You can get into a lot of detail as well,
Yeah.
but that's I suppose the main ones is the wormers, and thinking about the habitat over the closed periods.
Yeah. Let's go into more of the science behind wormers, if it's okay, Claire. What are anthelmintics actually doing to
I
dung
knew you were going to get
beetles?
caught on
Oh,
it. I was waiting for
It's
it.
okay. No, don't worry. Yeah, so they're used
loved it.
to. So anthelmintics refer specifically to worming products, I would say. So problems like lungworm that we see in our cattle, or problems that we get with gut worms as well. So we can get really, really severe illness in our livestock through both gutworm, lungworm, and other parasites as well. So things like liver fluke, but they will be treated again slightly differently. So you can get diarrhea, you can get quite high mortality, particularly with high sort of worm burdens in your livestock. So they are quite serious, and obviously farmers are rightly concerned about them in their animals. And I think this is probably important to mention as well. When I was at vet school, and I'm sure when a lot of farmers were at agricultural college, we were taught about using wormers. We were taught that if an animal has a worm burden, it needs worming. Now, I was never told about the potential environmental impacts of that, whether or not it was known, whether, it was never mentioned. And I think that's the same with how farming's taught potentially as well. I just don't think it was ever really considered. Now, again, like I say, I don't know if it's anyone's fault. It just was the way it was. And I didn't understand those impacts. And even, I don't mind saying this, when I graduated and the first few years of veterinary practice, worming wasn't something I really got involved with on farm. The products that you can get are available from trade, so they're prescription, but they can be prescribed by a vet, a pharmacist, or a suitably qualified person. So it doesn't necessarily mean the vet's always involved in the decision making around worming on the farm. So yeah, as I say, not something I really got interested in until I started looking into the dung beetle side of things, and now it's something that I think is really important. It's obviously a really important part of health and production management, so it's something that I think the vet should really be involved with. I know Bruce gets involved with his vet definitely on it now. So basically it's sort of thinking about the environmental impacts of what we're using. So again, it would just be a case of which wormer do you use and when you're going to do it, and that would be as far as my input really went. Now we start thinking about other things. So pasture rotation would be an example. So if you put young stock, for example, out in the same pasture year on year on year, all that's going to happen is that worm burden is going to build up. So thinking about where you're going to put your young stock, for example, thinking about quarantine treatments for animals, so you're not bringing on external parasites onto your farm. So anthelmintics are actually a really tiny part of what we do. And thinking of, like Bruce said, do you actually need to use them? So are we doing fecal egg counts? Are we actually looking at whether or not your animals need worming? Not only because we need to probably be thinking about protecting our ecosystems, but also, as Bruce mentioned earlier, a lot of the parasites that we have now are becoming resistant to the treatments that we're using. I think the same's across the board, whether we're using fertilizers or pesticides on our farms as well. Weeds still happen, but you can treat animals with anthelmintics and they can still be infected. And we need to check not only whether or not they need worming, but then once we've treated our animals, we need to test them again to see if that's actually worked, because if it hasn't, it means there's likely resistance on our farm and we may need to be thinking about using other products. So I think trying to get your vet involved, talking about diagnostics, what you can do, whether or not you need to treat, etc., all becomes a lot more important, and something that I'm doing a lot more with my farms now.
I suppose a big point to make, we haven't really hit on it yet, is these dung beetles actually help reduce the loading on pasture. Really, like it's the biggest service that they're providing farmers with. So what the beetles actually do, we think that they eat the dung pats. They don't actually eat them. They drink them, and they drink all the juices out of the pats. Remember that they're mostly liquid anyway, but they drink them, and they dry them to a point that the earthworms find them appealing, and then they if you actually dig up a half degraded dung pat, you will find underneath it is a mine of earthworms. So they get it to a point, and the earthworms will take over from there. So in drying it, and not only are the earthworms helping to get rid of it, but they're dehydrating the dung pat, which, when you consider these parasites are mainly aquatic, as in they swim out through the dung pat to get onto the after they hatch, to get out onto the grass. So they're disrupting their cycle. And Claire was talking about the lungworm there, that kind of relies on a fungus called pilobolus. That fungus literally shoots the lungworm off the dung pat up onto the grass. But the dung pat has to be a moist type of dung pat for this pilobolus fungus to grow on it. So again, your dung beetles are helping in that regard. And the obvious thing is, with the burrowers, then they're bringing it down into the soil, bringing the poo down into the soil. Like when those parasites are buried down in the soil, that's it. It's game over for them. Like they cannot get up onto the grass then to complete their life cycle.
Let's talk about NEP, because you're doing some work with the NEP estate for their new regenerative farming project. What can you tell us about that? Who wants to go on that?
I can go. Bruce
Oh, Bruce.
I can't even get my local town.
Oh God, I feel terrible. Yeah, so we're going to be doing some surveys down there. So having a look at what species they've got. Hopefully Sally Ann's going to bring her 15 different microscopes so I can have a look. And then hopefully we're hoping to try and develop a bit of a survey that farmers are able to do themselves. So just something to be able to easily monitor the sort of numbers, abundance of dung beetles on their farms without necessarily having to go into that detail of needing microscopes, etc. So yeah, no, quite exciting. Yep. Particularly as the Wilding book, the Isabella Tree book at NEP was like, literally the source of all this for me. So I'm particularly excited.
So it brings it full circle. And finally, apart from the website, which I'll give that another plug, dungbeetlesforfarmers.co.uk, how can anyone listening today find out more?
Okay, well, we're constantly putting updates, on the website, but also on @DungBeetleFarms on Twitter is probably a good place, and we're on Facebook as well. Claire, what's our name on Facebook?
I think you just search Dung Beetles for Farmers and we bob up. And there's an Instagram page as well, Brilliant. Which is also Dung Beetle Farmers. So you can have a little look. James will be happy we've mentioned all of those things.
He will be.
And we're quite happy to answer questions as well. So we can just send us DMs or emails and we'll get back to you.
It's actually really exciting because some of them we don't have the answers to, and we need to go and do a little more digging. But I enjoy that.
Well, thanks to you both so much for coming on. Like I say, I've learned so much just in these few minutes, and I'll definitely be going away to find out some more as well. But that is all we have time for. But a massive thank you to Claire and Bruce for coming on the show today and telling us all about dung beetles. Next week, I'll be joined by a panel of guests to discuss farm and countryside education and about getting kids out onto farms, including all the complications that COVID has brought with it, and there have been lots for that. So I hope you can join me then. But until then, have a great week.